Okay, good evening. Well, it's not evening anymore. This is a good morning thing because it is 9 a.m. So, welcome to Council Chambers. Today we have a special meeting on our agenda, and it's just to get some information regarding a kind of online survey we did, and also an update on an education program regarding wearing masks in our community. Members of Council, there is agenda before you. Administration, is there anything to add?
No, Your Worship, not at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Deputy Mayor, if I can ask you to move the agenda, please.
I move that Town Council adopt the August 24th, 2020 Special Council Meeting agenda as presented.
Okay, thank you very much. Members of Council, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Okay, moving on to business items. That is the COVID-19 education program and mandatory face mask. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. As per direction from the last week's regular council meeting, we have a report to present to council regarding a couple different topics. We've tied them into one report. Education, public education, results of a mass survey that was conducted last week, and then some commentary on mass bylaws and their administration through the metro region, and a little bit of comment likely on within the town of Stony Plain itself. Your Worship, at this point, I would just ask Brenda Otto, our manager or general manager of strategic services, to provide some comment to the report that's been provided to council.
Thank you, Town Manager, and good morning, Mayor and Council. For your further information and in response to the direction provided from Council at the August 17th meeting, we have prepared and provided in your agenda package for you a summary, and I'll start with the COVID-19 prevention education campaign. Administration has been sharing information provided as through direction from the Government of Alberta related to prevention guidelines and information, public information regarding this preventing the spread of COVID-19 since the pandemic first started in March. And as of late and through the direction of council, we've looked at how we can augment this public education campaign for an ongoing period of time. And so in your agenda package, I did include a summary of our relaunch efforts related to the public education, looking to enhance and ensure that we're providing an active public education information role in preventing the spread of COVID-19. So some of the key messages that we would typically provide and share with members of the community through our social media outlets and our other communication tools as provided by the Government of Alberta. General categories that this information falls under is related to wearing a mask in public spaces where people are not able to stay 2 meters apart, additional physical distancing messaging, particularly in the outdoors and public spaces, staying at home when sick and self-isolating, measures and recommendations around hand washing, online COVID-19 assessment tools that are available if someone suspects that they are having symptoms that they want to further follow up on. In addition to that, testing information where people can seek testing appointments and guidance related to testing for COVID-19. The Government of Alberta's status map. So this indicates where active cases are currently outlined across the province within a regional and community format, as well as information about status information across the country as well. And finally, how to cohort in for safe interactions. So utilizing close proximity with family members and those that you're in association with, and how to maintain those safe cohorts for social interactions going forward. So those are kind of the general categories of information that we're sharing right now through the Government of Alberta. And what we have committed to is trying to continue to schedule these updates and sharing of this information on a daily basis, keeping in mind that we do have information that's conditional upon the Government of Alberta's messaging, as well as the prioritization of other key messages that the town does need to share with our community members. And we manage the flow of that information on a daily basis. The messages will be balanced through our communication tools, which include not only our social media accounts, but also our website, digital signs, and the neighborhood letterboard signs that we utilize as well. So that kind of summarizes our education prevention campaign. Perhaps maybe I'll just pause if Mayor would like, Council would like, and if there's any questions regarding that, I can take public education questions before I move on to the survey results.
Thank you very much for the update on the kind of what the town is doing in terms of public education. Members of council, any questions or of clarity on that? Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Administration, for that information. 2 questions. It states in here it was relaunched on August 19th. I'm not sure why the educational campaign that was relaunched was ever stopped. I'm just wondering, number 1, if you can advise if there is a tentative end date for this campaign, or if that is going to continue throughout the continuation of the COVID pandemic. And secondly, talks a lot about key messages that are shared from the Government of Alberta. Are we looking to develop any of our own content, or are we simply just going to rehash the same content that the government is providing?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Laurie and all of Council, the first question around the timing. We didn't technically stop the campaign, but as Council noted in the last meeting, certainly the messaging had probably, spaced out further apart and certainly been diminished. There was also a number of projects, events, things going on in the community that have probably taken precedent in terms of information that's been going out through our communication channels in the last couple of months. So the priority perhaps shifted more than we would have liked, and so we've realigned our priorities around ensuring that the public education campaign does continue to take precedent on our communication channels as through the direction of council. And with that, I would say that our messages will and our campaign will continue to be ongoing. We don't have a speculative end date in mind at this point in time. I would say that we're probably working towards a general time frame of the end of this year, but we would, of course, monitor the pandemic and how the virus continues to impact the community and some of the key messages that the government is sending out. Tying in with the second question that you had around the messaging specifically, at this point in time, we have very much stuck to sharing the Government of Alberta's message. We've tried to identify the Government of Alberta, Alberta Health Services, as the primary source of protocols, guidelines, procedures, and to ensure that there's clarity around the exact information that the public should be monitoring and advised upon. We don't want to assume any sort of authority on these types of messages. So that's been our perspective around this, is that we want to ensure that there's a clear line of sight to the public education campaign source being the Government of Alberta, and that we share those messages directly and accurately to ensure clarity for the members of our community.
Thank you very much. That provides some clarity, Councilor Laurie.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to Councilor Mattis, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is with regards to how that message is relayed. I spoke the other evening with regards to having like a mascot or some kind of an animated type of an education component that goes with that, because that way you'll be able to reach the younger population as well, and they maybe be able to relate with more people. So having the information that's provided by the government, but maybe presenting it in a little bit a different way that shows examples of right behaviors and things like that, because that worked extraordinarily well when we did the recycling program. And potentially, we're going to be doing this for some time, and it would be a very good complement, I think, to the overall education campaign.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Any other questions of clarity regarding the education program? Councilor Lori?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to note, follow up to Councillor Mattie's comments, that there are specific youth-targeted videos and posters from the Alberta government. So I think it would be pretty easy for administration to grab that content and share it so that it retains the same message that our general manager just said to us about the consistency in the messaging and ensuring that it comes from the correct source. So they do have several specific campaigns. Most have been very prevalent with back to school coming in approximately a week. So there's a lot of good animated videos and those kind of things that do appeal to the younger demographic that I'm sure we can access very easily.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, and it's also, as the general manager mentioned, it is also better for us to share the data and information from the government of Alberta so that we're not seen as the authority. The provincial health officer is the authority, the government of Alberta is the authority, and we should not cross our messaging, so it's very prudent of us to make sure that the message is shared and not created by us. Any other questions of clarity, understanding? Okay. Seeing none, go ahead with the survey results, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just following up on the second component of the direction of council from the August 17th meeting, administration prepared an online survey to garner feedback, and so I would just like to share the report and results from that survey with council and the community. We very much appreciate the feedback that we did receive from the public. It was very heartening to see our members of the public so quickly and so enthusiastically get engaged with this subject matter. I know it's been a source of public dialogue and discourse throughout the region, across the province, and frankly across the country and broader. So it was a great opportunity for us to have that dialogue specifically for our community and gather some input. So as noted in the report that's provided, and I've included the presentation in a slideshow format here to enhance for the virtual meeting this morning. We launched the online survey following the council meeting last Tuesday, August 18th, and we used an online survey tool, and the survey was open until the end of day on Saturday, August 22nd. The questions that were utilized, we kept the questions very simplistic and straightforward. We utilized 7 questions, and I'll walk through each one individually. And I just want to indicate that we did try to align very closely with the wording of the questions that were used with surveys that were taking place in the region, across the region, so that it was easy if someone wanted to look at the results of other municipal surveys that have been going on about this subject matter, that they could relate the responses and some of the feedback that were received in other communities relatively easy. So we utilized the similar question format for that very reason. So the objective of the survey, as noted in this slide, was really to get a better understanding of the perceptions around face masks, the reason for wearing them or not wearing them, general sentiment towards the introduction of possible temporary face mask bylaw that council is considering. So those were the general objectives that we utilized to guide and gather feedback. So just a quick summary of the highlights from the report. As I said, I'll go into the specific questions of each components of it, but we had a total response of just over 4,500 surveys that were received through the online tool, which was a significant, I would say, a significant response. I know some of the surveys that were taking place both in Spruce Grove, Leduc, and Strathcona County had similar kind of high, strong levels of feedback from their community. And just for clarity, we did provide the opportunity for all members of the public to participate in this survey, so people could indicate if they were a resident of Stony Plain or not. We certainly wanted to take into consideration those that perhaps frequent the community both for visiting or shopping, dining, or for work. So perhaps Stony Plain is their second home, so to speak, and so great for them to give the opportunity to give some input to to the survey as well and share that. So we did break down the survey results, and 57, well, almost 58% of the participants in the survey were from Stony Plain, so Stony Plain residents. And of those Stony Plain residents, there was a slight indication of, just above 50% indication of general support for mandatory face masks. On the flip side, when you look at the overall survey respondents, there was, again, a slight 54% indication of opposition to face masks, mandatory face masks. So just a slight difference in the respondents based on the residents versus the overall respondents. So getting into the specific findings of the survey, question one, as we have talked about, was a breakdown of residents versus non-residents that partook in the survey, and again, just over 4,500 overall respondents, and just over 2,600 were Stony Plain residents. Second question involved, an indication of how often you actually wear a mask while visiting indoor spaces. So the indication there shows, probably a strong, spread of indication of sometimes to always, and 36% as never. So, a pretty strong mix of respondents to these questions. And this is for all the respondents. I'll get into the breakdown of the Stony Plain residents so you can see the difference between the results on this question as well. So not too much different in terms of the results. A pretty strong mix between those that always wear a face mask to sometimes to never. So there isn't a strong majority in respondents to this question for Stony Plain residents also. Question 3, and I apologize, the details of the survey perhaps don't have a very good clarity just because the amount of content on the slide, so my apologies. But the third question here, again, this is all respondents noting challenges that you experience while wearing a face mask. You can certainly see that from the bar chart that there's about 3 to maybe 4 top level responses, and so the green, the kind of orange color, the red, and the beige. So the green indication is I don't experience any challenges. The orange is general discomfort noted in wearing a mask, and the red is I don't believe wearing a mask is important, and then the fourth kind of highest response was I just don't like it. So of the Stony Plain resident respondents, there was actually, again, fairly similar feedback that was garnered. The sort of the top 3 to 4 respondents were the same in this category as well, with just maybe a slight variation in the percentages, but those 4 responses were strongly noted. Question 4 indicates to what extent do you support or oppose face masks being mandatory in indoor spaces in the town. And so the support indication on this one, as I said, it's generally just slightly higher on the opposition side versus the support side, as you can see the line with the yellow tipping the scale to 54%. And on the respondents for residents, this outlines, as I had previously said before, just the slight indication of support for face masks being mandatory in indoor spaces from Stony Plain residents. Question 5 is a further breakdown. So of those who supported face masks or indicated support for face masks, just to gather a little bit of feedback as to why they support face masks. The response options were noted as to reduce the spread of COVID-19, to protect those that are generally vulnerable to COVID-19, and as an effective, it's effective when everyone wears them, and to keep everyone safe, and face masks can stop infected individuals who aren't displaying symptoms of COVID-19 from unintentional infection of others. And then the option of other, which is the purple at the bottom. So certainly the indications were fairly evenly spread across the top 5 answers, with general support mixed amongst all of those, and a small 10% of respondents indicating the other. Of the Stony Plain residents that answered this question as to why they support face masks being mandatory, again, very similar looking responses with a fairly even spread amongst the 4 out of 5 of the responses of options, and again, only about 10% indicating the other category and adding some unique responses under that. So for those that were opposed or do not support face masks being mandatory and gathering the same little further feedback as to why, the response options were it should be my choice as to whether or not I wear a face mask. Face masks can create issues for people with disabilities. Face masks can be difficult for those who have breathing issues. Face masks are not clearly proven to offer protection from the spread of COVID-19 or other, is the bottom one. And again, there's a fairly even spread of respondents with a slightly stronger response to whether it should be my choice as to whether I wear a face mask or not, and that face masks are not clearly proven to offer spread from COVID-19. So those are the green and the light blue responses there that are a little further out ahead of the others. And of the Stony Plain residents, again, very similar response to the overall respondents, with both the option of choice being the primary concern and not clearly proven to offer protection from the spread of COVID-19 as the reason why they would oppose mandatory face masks. The final question that we included in the survey was just a breakdown of categories of age, just to give a bit of a further demographic profile to the respondents that participated. Of the categories that were noted, the light blue was the highest on the pie chart there, and that is the 45 to 64 age category. The next highest was the age range just below at 35 to 44, and the dark blue, which is the third highest age category, was the 25 to 34 category. We did have a just under a 10% response rate from the 24 and under category, and then as you move into the 65 plus category, there was about a 9% response rate of those ranging. So we certainly had a strong response from those kind of ranging from 25 to 64, with smaller responses in both the youth and the seniors category. And that was the overall respondents. This is the Stony Plain resident respondents, and again, fairly similar category breakdowns here as well, with again about a 10% response rate for the youth or the 24 and under, as well as the 65 and over, and the majority of respondents in the 25 to 64 categories. The final slide that I'll just add to this presentation. So those were the results of the surveys that were submitted as of the end of Saturday evening, and we'll include a copy of the report of the results with the highlights that go out on our website, so that the public can certainly have a full copy of the report of the survey. I did just want to pass along and reiterate the information about the surveys that I had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation of the other municipalities that were noted as conducting similar types of surveys recently. As you're aware, City of Spruce Grove completed their survey prior to ours, and their results also indicated a fairly even split between the supporting and opposing of mandatory face masks. Leduc, the City of Leduc, just finished their surveys, and their results came in and are posted online through their website as well. And again, just slightly, stronger opposition to mandatory face masks. And then the bottom one is Strathcona County. I think they were one of the first ones to do a survey, and theirs indicates a little bit higher level of support. So that's the summary report of what we provided for the online survey related to mandatory masks, and would be happy to try to answer any questions of council at this point in time.
Thank you very much for the presentation on the online survey that was conducted over the past week. Members of council, any questions of clarity and understanding on that presentation? Councillor Bennett, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I noticed that we compared to Spruce Grove, City of Leduc, and Strathcona County, but I'm wondering if you know, administration, if Beaumont did a public survey such as ours, and what their results would be. I'm pointing out Beaumont because our population is similar, and yeah, that's my question.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Deputy Mayor Bennett, I'm not aware if they did a mass survey specifically. We can take a quick look online right now, but I'm certainly not aware unless someone else is.
Your Worship and Town Manager, through to Councillor Bennett. When I looked yesterday on the Beaumont's website, I didn't see any indication of a survey, but they did just recently have a bylaw summary. So I'm not aware of a survey being conducted, but these are the only 3 within the region of municipal surveys that I could find online that are available in terms of summary results.
Thank you.
Councillor Matthews, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. We completed a survey for Stony Plain and people who come to our community because we wanted to have the feedback of this community, and we've heard them. And, you know, when I look at you know, myself and just, you know, kind of going from an individual, and I wear a mask, but I don't always wear a mask. Like, I was at a meeting the other day with the chamber, and there was maybe 12 people in the room. We were all 2 feet apart. I've placed for my own. But you know what, I don't want myself personally to be mandated to wear a mask, because there's times where I just don't need to, or feel I need to, or want to wear a mask. And I think that our community has spoken in that same way, that, you know, there's a number that are strongly supportive of it, but the majority are either not strongly supportive, like they mildly supportive of it, or not supportive of a mandatory mask. So just, you know, in terms of we look back at those results, it would be important, I think, just review what our community did say.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'm going to make a comment first in response to Councillor Matty's comment. You mentioned that it seemed that our opposition was outweighing our support, but our strongly support from Stony Plain residents is 38.71%, and our strongly oppose is 37.79%. So I would actually say the survey states we have fairly equal across the board, with a slight advantage to the strongly supporting having masks, not an advantage towards opposing. The numbers are the numbers, and that is what they say. We have 50.5% of residents and 47.7, or sorry, we have 50.78 supporting and 49.21. And I find it interesting, I did a couple of comparisons to Spruce Grove survey as well, and when you actually look, when you remove the component of non-residents, there's actually a significant number in non-residents and opposed. And I was following social media, and what I did find is that many people who were opposed to face masks were posting on social media trying to essentially, call it, rally the troops to fill out surveys in communities to which they did not live on the opposition of face masks. And I think it shows true in the results, and I appreciate administration breaking down our results by residents and then overall. But if you go one layer further and you break it out of non-residents, you see this very clearly. Stony Plain residents supporting face masks, 50.78%. Overall respondents supporting, 45.77. For non-residents, that drops to 38.86. So when you actually look at the data shows you that a significant number of the opposition to our face masks comes from non-residents. It clearly states in our survey, we have, I think it was almost 200, I believe it was, who filled out our survey, 175 people who filled out our survey that don't live in Stony Plain. They also don't visit Stony Plain frequently for work, shopping, or other activities. So clearly right there is 175 people who are in no way, shape, or form a part of our municipality that have filled out our municipality survey. And I'd ask the question, why? Because I certainly don't think we would have very many respondents filling out this survey from another community who supported this bylaw. I definitely didn't see that rhetoric online. However, I do want to
Okay,
commend
just,
administration.
can I just chime in here, please? This is not a debate amongst ourselves. This was for clarity and understanding of what the presentation was. So if you can keep your comments and that for a debate, if there's actually a motion coming forward to the table, please.
For sure, Your Worship. So my clarity comment would be in regards to the last slide we saw from administration that talks about Spruce Grove's results and showing Spruce Grove at a 49% opposition. That would be incorrect. Spruce Grove actually had a category of I don't know that made up about 2%, and it looks like that 2% was included in the opposed. Spruce Grove's numbers are 50.5% support and 47.7% oppose.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Kletchko.
Thank you, Your Worship. So for clarity, question 6, and I'm going to refer to face masks are not clearly proven to offer protection for the spread of COVID-19. I'm wondering if administration can provide to me something through Health Canada or through something that the government of Alberta has provided that can clearly show that wearing face masks helped prevent this. As we know today, the City of Edmonton has a current bylaw that is mandatory face masks all over, while having the highest amount of COVID in the province currently. And I'm just wondering, correlation of the two things that shows that any type of face mask works. Where my concern comes is the face masks that we use today, everybody's just building, which is not medical of any sort. I'm wondering if those are talked about anywhere in the health link that prove that a non-medical mask actually prevents something.
Your Worship, I can provide a bit of comment there, and maybe just for a bit of an explanation as well. So, I mean, these types of questions in a survey are really asking for that individual's perception. Their perception, their response, their understanding of the issue that they're being asked about. You know, I guess I would add a little bit further that, and I think the responses in the survey as to the, you know, why do you support or why do you not support, clearly indicate what would likely, in my opinion, show that the public is not entirely sure as to the science behind it. And it, frankly, Your Worship, in some ways can become a fairly polarizing question or issue, as we saw on some of our own Facebook pages and the commentary there. So if I could maybe just summarize that quickly. I mean, these are questions of individual perception. Do they speak to exact science? I would say no. They speak to that particular individual's perception of the literature, the science, their own values that they place, the trust in that information that they receive. If asked directly, I mean, I believe, the town of Stony Plain has throughout this entire thing deferred questions of science to the government of Alberta, the chief medical officer, who does recommend hand cleaning, social distancing, and as well as the use of a mask to help limit the spread. That would be, I believe, Your Worship, our answer / deferral to those that have much more expertise than we do on that specific topic.
Thank you. Councilor Matthews?
My question was with regards to clarity in terms of the numbers of both Stony Plain and non-Stony Plain residents that are strongly support versus strongly oppose. And when you look at the people that are not Stony Plain residents, they've indicated in that survey that they shop here and they come here to this community. So either they're lying or, they basically have given us some good information that they're saying that they prefer not to have masks or a mandatory mask policy. So I'd like clarification. First of all, when we look at the numbers here, when I see the Stony Plain versus Spruce Grove, Stony Plain versus the total group being strongly opposed, so the strongly opposed for the overall group is 44%, and for Stony Plain, it's going back to, so this is, for the strongly opposed, it's 43.46% for the overall group, and for Stony Plain, it's 37.79 or almost 38%. It's almost equal to the number of strongly support. And then over to the total group, the number that are strongly opposed are greater than the overall. But the point is that when we look at the data here, it's telling us that people are not, they want to choose. They want to be able to choose whether they wear it or not, is basically what I'm seeing, unless administration can tell me different.
Okay, thank you for that comment, and we'll move on. I do have a question of clarity and understanding. I noticed on our survey, we have the different age brackets. And my question is, every age bracket is 10 years apart, except for the most age bracket, which is 45 to 64. So I'm just want some clarity of why that wasn't broken down to 45 to 54 and 55 to 64, a 10-year gap like the other ones. And I understand why we went 75 plus, but why the largest segment of our population that participated in the surveys here and abroad were lumped into one 20-year period.
Your Worship, the response to that would be that we selected age categories that aligned with the other surveys that were done in the region. We didn't differentiate from those, just to keep the demographic comparison consistent.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions of clarity and understanding before we move on here? Okay. Thank you. That's everything. Administration, anything to add and provide?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. I'm going to speak a bit to the third aspect of the request, I believe, from last week was just to provide some further update or commentary on what I believe are called temporary mandatory phase covering bylaws throughout the Edmonton metro region. So within the body of the report, two were included. City of Spruce Grove, which was, again, adopted, I believe, on August 17th or not, but, and Leduc, that was on August 17th. A couple basic overview comments, Your Worship. Most bylaws within the metro region, most municipalities do have some form of a bylaw in place, but not all. I believe Devon, Morinville, and 3 of the counties are still or do not have a bylaw in place at this point in time. The other comment I would make, there's other general separation in the bylaws that do exist. It's my understanding, again, that Beaumont, Edmonton, and St. Albert have it as a mandatory as of today, so to speak. The other bylaws tend to speak to some form of a trigger point that when they do go into place as a mandatory bylaw. I wasn't intending, Your Worship, again, to go into great detail on the bylaws themselves or the rationale. I understand and know that Council has been following this issue quite clearly over the past probably 4 to 6 weeks. There were a few things I did include in the report, Your Worship, that I believe Council should have some consideration for if you choose to go further along the mask bylaw debate process. Again, number one, just alignment within the metro region. Typically on cross-border things, we will look to have some form of alignment. That's something for Council to keep in mind. Second thing would be whether you would look at having it in place immediately, or would there be a trigger point where it would come into play and would be required by people within the town of Stony Plain? Further on that, just a human consideration as to how you would want to have that trigger point come in. I believe Leduc is an example of one that just has a raw number. I believe that number is 10. So when active cases hit 10, the bylaw comes into place. Spruce Grove, on the other hand, has gone towards the watch designation, which I believe has a higher threshold number given their population relative to Leduc. So just so I can be clear there, the watch designation in Spruce Grove, I think, kicks in around 18. City of Leduc, with a similar population, has chosen a number of 10 active cases to have their bylaw come into place. So that's just a brief background on some of the different ways you could look at it. The final thing would be, in some of the debates and discussion going on in the metro region, would be what would remove the bylaw from being in place. If you had a trigger point, if you had an enactment point, when does the bylaw cease to be in place? So that's another thing for council consideration should you choose to go any further with putting a mask bylaw in place. The other thing that I believe council has probably seen or heard of in the news and the debate on this topic is any sort of exemptions. All the bylaws that I've looked at within the metro region have a very similar list of exemptions. They tend to be children under a certain age, people with disabilities who are just, unable to wear a mask, so on and so forth. Those are also included in both the Leduc and the Spruce Grove bylaw. They, again, tend to be pretty similar across the region for a list of exemptions. The final comment I'll make, Your Worship, along this topic or along this line is, again, the other thing that seems to be fairly similar across the region is that there's not going to be what we would call active enforcement of the bylaws. They tend to speak more both, in the lead sheets, the RFDs, and some of the debate going on in the council chambers in response by other municipal administrations is that the approach would be heavy education, working with people in the community to try to achieve compliance and so on and so forth, as opposed to what you would typically consider active enforcement, i.e., if you're found without a mask, you won't be fined specifically on the first time, so on and so forth. Your Worship, those are just some broad commentary. Again, there was 2 copies of recent bylaws included, one right next door to us and one just down the road. As council is well aware, bylaws require 3 readings. They can be completed in a regular council meeting, not in our typical GNP meetings, or they can be passed at a special council meeting as set by council date, time, and place. Your Worship, thank you for the opportunity to speak to that. I can certainly answer any questions related to the bylaws themselves.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think that's just all we need as kind of information from you in terms of what a temporary mask bylaw may not look like. Members of council, I'm going to ask for a motion to accept for information. Councilor Lowry, go ahead.
Your Worship, I actually have a question for our town manager.
Okay.
May I ask?
Sure. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. You speak to the bylaw. Can you speak to a little bit about administration's approach to town-owned public facilities? The City of Spruce Grove did not include the town-owned or the city-owned public facilities in their bylaw, as they took that as an administrative decision and have made the administrative decision to move to mandatory face masking in all of their public facilities as they begin to open up. So can you speak a little bit to the town of Stony Plain's approach to our public facilities?
Absolutely. So, Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie, a couple maybe basic comments too before I go a little bit further. But those communities that have transit systems have had some form of administrative procedure in on the transit systems that they have. So, I mean, whether it was Edmonton, Spruce Grove, Leduc, so on, you know, those were generally put in through administrative procedure. Again, Spruce Grove has indicated that approach as well in most of their facilities. We have had some conversation about that, Your Worship. I don't believe that we've arrived at any hard decision. We will be opening the town office August 31st to the public in limited ways. You know, the messaging goes out, I believe, today or tomorrow that people will be welcomed, allowed back into the town office to pay bills and so on and so forth. The other facilities that we do have are slowly, in my understanding, are slowly being brought back into operation. You know, I mean, some of them have been technically open. We just don't have the bookings. We have user groups starting to inquire as to coming back into some of our facilities, and so that is something that is on our radar. The other thing too, just to be clear, I think it's noted in the report, is that that can also be done by bylaw or it can be done through administrative procedure. I think the choice to go administrative procedure on those is that it allows for certain amounts of flexibility. You know, I would say, you know, is there a difference between heavy use in a recreation facility versus one or two people coming into the town office on any given day to pay a bill? Does it need to be mandatory here? Does it need to be mandatory in a more active facility? Those are some of the issues or points that we would have a discussion on. We are due for an update from our relaunch committee, I believe this week. Probably going to hear more from the staff directly involved in the administration of those facilities. And at that point in time, unless or should be council direct differently, you know, I mean, we would be making those sorts of decisions and trying to understand what best fits for our facilities, whether they're individually or collectively as a whole.
Councillor Bennett, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Mayor, I just have a couple questions. So on our act, the handy bus, are masks mandatory on that?
Yeah, Your Worship, I think we've been doing that for both staff and people using them right from day one. Those, I mean, they did, I know our numbers went way down at first, but as they've picked back up, you know, I mean, we've had that in place for quite some time over there.
Thank you. My second question then to administration, I'm referring back to Councillor Palechko's question about clear evidence. In the research that you have conducted, there has been, have you found which organizations suggest that it is clearly evident that wearing masks can limit the number of the spread of COVID? For instance, I know that the Center for Disease Control recommends it or has clear evidence. What other organizations have you come across that indicate it is a clear indication?
Your Worship, maybe, I mean, I can make some further comments on that particular question and that line of questioning, so to speak, for Deputy Mayor as well as the rest of council. So, you know, I mean, as a public body, you know, I mean, we do our best to understand and appreciate and interpret some of the direction that we get. As individuals, we certainly follow the news and look things up just like anybody else along this topic. You know, so if asked again, or if, I mean, I'm not sure if I can, I'll try to make this as clear as I can. I mean, the government of Canada, the government of Alberta, their medical officers, you know, I mean, across our country and certainly beyond, have indicated that, I mean, masks and wearing a mask play a part in limiting the spread of COVID-19, as do social distancing, hand cleaning, limiting your exposure to others, and so on and so forth. You know, I will stop there. There's certainly an active debate, you know, I mean, all across the internet as to, you know, the rationale, the reality, so on and so forth. But, you know, I mean, like many things, clarity is much more powerful nowadays than information. There's an entire terabyte of information coming onto my phone every 5 minutes. You know, when I look for clarity, I look for those that hold positions of authority, tend to hold a position of trust, i.e. medical officers, elected officials dealing with the pandemic. In our country, Canadians have relatively high trust in those people. And when asked directly, that's my response, and I believe that's a response of our administration. Those are the authorities. They do speak to wearing masks as a way to prevent. They also speak very clearly to hand washing, social distancing, and maintaining and limiting your exposure. So, Your Worship, I'm not sure if that directly or specifically answers the question, but that's the values and the themes that we've approached this entire thing through since March.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much. And yeah, I guess it is hard for us to debate the possibility of maybe a temporary mask bylaw with administrative staff. They have no work in the debate. It is amongst ourselves as a council. Understanding of clarity of if there is support for masks and for not masks if they work, you can just go online and you can just type in do mask work and you get 100,000 hits. If you hit do mask not work, you get 100,000 hits. So it is out there in the public. And so it is, I can find you a doctor that says, you know, going to school is awesome. It's all the parameters have been put in to make sure there's a safe entry, and I got doctors providing the exact opposite evidence. So it is what our community feels, and then we did the survey to kind of look and ask the residents. I know we also have non-residents in here, but I'm focusing on the numbers of the residents that did commit to doing the survey so that we can review, debate, and then discuss. So I'm going to ask for the motion to accept this as information through our agenda. So, Councillor Loy, go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. And I move that we do accept the information as presented.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Loy. So again, members of council, this is a motion to accept for information. So we can talk about why we should not accept information. You can maybe ask a little more questions of clarity and understanding. But if you guys, as a council, want to collectively deal with a temporary mask bylaw or a full mandatory mask bylaw, that will happen after we accept this motion for information. Is that clear? Okay. So thank you very much, Councillor. Any questions of clarity and understanding regarding what was presented to us? We've had that chance. This is your second chance at the cat, more or less. Okay, seeing none. Okay, on behalf of our residents and council, thank you very much for taking the time to update us on the education program that will be kind of ramping up again. I understand that there is a lot of information out there, and it can be almost be COVID overload. So I'm okay with us kind of spacing out and at least having one message a day that we do not generate ourselves. Definitely share it from trusted and provided sources, and I believe that our staff has mentioned that the government of Alberta, the chief medical officer, is that source that we'll be relying on for sharing that information. And also thank you for getting the survey together and presenting that to us. As we've heard since this whole pandemic has started, it is half a dozen of one and six of the other. Right. It's also how you feel in terms of safety, what your risk factors are, and what you do for a living. That also increases that as well. And thank you for the little commentary on the temporary mask bylaw, face masking, how it could work, how it could not work. And as mentioned by our administrative staff, face mask is not the end-all and be-all of stopping COVID-19. It is just another tool in the toolkit. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware that we want to make sure that we do not put some kind of false security in our residents and people that support our communities by saying if they wear masks, they're good, which is 100% not the case. They still have to maintain social distancing. They still have to wash their hands frequently, right? And they still have to stay home when they're ill. All those things help us flatten the curve and prevent the spread. If you only do one of them and not the others, you're not doing yourself any favors. With that, thank you. So I'm going to call the question all in favor for information. Okay, that is carried. So as I mentioned earlier, Council, we've got the information. We've talked about it quite a few times now. Is there a desire to put in a mandatory face mask bylaw? Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Looking at the numbers from the survey and looking at our regional perspective, I actually quite like what the City of Spruce Grove did with their bylaw. What they did is they put in a masking bylaw that has a trigger. So I think I already heard once today that, oh, look at the City of Edmonton. The City of Edmonton put in a mandatory mask bylaw and they now have the highest numbers of COVID-19 in the province. But yeah, look at Edmonton. Were those outbreaks from public facilities? No. Most of those cases are private gathering outbreaks and family cases, etc. And the Chief Medical Officer was very clear in that in her statement on Thursday. One thing that's very encouraging to me is you mentioned about the tool in the toolbox. Throughout the survey, 68.49% of our residents are at least sometimes wearing a face mask. I think that's pretty good voluntary compliance to be up at 68.49% of our residents at least sometimes wearing a face mask. Would I like that to go from sometimes to more often than not or to always? Of course, but sometimes is better than none at all. But I do think there is potential that it gets to a point where, for the good of the community and for the good of our residents, we do need to consider having this put in place as a bylaw. And again, as I said, I feel that what the City of Spruce Grove has done with putting the watch limitation on there works. And the reason why that works is a bit broad. And if you watch their meeting and listen to the description of the watch topic, the watch isn't just a number. So as we've heard, to hit the watch category, the easiest way to say it is Spruce Grove gets to 18 cases. Stony Plain, we would be 10. However, multiple items are considered in that. For instance, if all 18 of those cases in the City of Spruce Grove were at a senior's home that was contained as an outbreak there, that would not actually put them in the watch category because it is not considered community spread. In order to be put into a watch category, you have to have defined community spread. Now, unfortunately, we don't have an epidemiologist on our staff, or do we have easy access to one, but Alberta Health Services certainly does. And so if Alberta Health Services is putting us in a watch category, they're essentially saying they see a rise of community spread of COVID-19 in our municipality that has them concerned. And if a chief medical officer of health is starting to get concerned about what's going on in the town of Stony Plain, I think it's at that point in time that we should start taking steps to protect the community as best as possible. The next category with Alberta Health Services puts you into a point in time where Alberta Health Services will start putting in specific regulations from their standpoint, and that could include closing down some of our businesses if we reached into that next category. So I think it would be prudent of us to have something in place in the watch category to attempt to direct our residents to use the tools in the toolbox. Right now, the 6-foot physical distancing is in place, and technically our peace officers could be issuing tickets for the violations of that. We could sit at the skate park. We could have a peace officer patrol the farmers market. We could have peace officers going in and out of our businesses, and we could be enforcing that right now. But as you mentioned, enforcement, in my opinion, is not the right option. Education and encouraging voluntary compliance is, but there comes a point in time where I feel we need to. So I'd like to put a motion on the floor that Town Council direct administration to prepare a temporary mandatory face covering bylaw to be presented to council at a special meeting of council within 14 days to match the City of Spruce Grove's bylaw.
Okay. So the motion is that have administration for a temporary face covering to be brought back in 2 weeks. 14 days. Okay. May I ask why 14 days versus maybe at our next regular council meeting?
Your worship, I prefer as soon as possible. I feel 14 days gives administration flexibility to schedule a meeting best fits with theirs to ensure that they review the bylaws, they have tailored directions and stuff like that. However, I believe time is of the essence in this. No. We also have schools starting back up very quickly here, which has been touted by many professionals in the medical field to be the potential start of a second wave. I feel I would like to see, we've kicked this around, let's be honest, we've kicked this around as council for several weeks already. I feel there's no point in delay. I feel waiting until September 14th would be irresponsible if this is the whole anyway. If we're considering putting a bylaw in place, we should be putting this bylaw in place as soon as possible.
Okay, so Councilor, you are aware that to do 3 readings in one sitting, we need unanimous consent. And from what I'm hearing here, I do not believe we'll get unanimous consent.
So then, your worship, at least if we do a special meeting, we can have the first two readings done, and at maximum, then we would be waiting to September 14th for the third.
So my question to members of the council is, can we get unanimous consent on the 14th and not do another meeting? It is more time for our staff. We also know that our staff has been stretched. We've hired less personnel. We have not hired and backfill positions that were vacant. So do we need another meeting to debate a temporary massive bylaw when we can all do it on the 14th if there's, because I am in agreement with Councilor Laurie. If we do not have unanimous consent on the 14th, that means then it's pushed us out to the next one, which then makes it the end of September. Okay. So I am supportive of masking. I'm also supporting of making sure that it's used as a tool and not as a heavy-handed, you must do this, because voluntary compliance is far better than mandated compliance. I'll let you sit on that because you made that motion. I don't think you're going to change it, so I'll keep that as it is. So members of council has the ability to debate that and amend that as well. Councilor Loy.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I don't see the urgency in 14 days. We have not had an increase in the COVID issue. I think we had 3 cases out of a population of almost 17,000, 18,000. There's no indicators that I've seen that we have a potential problem that it's starting to rise and spike. We've taxed administration on this for a survey to be done in short notice. The results are the same results that we knew from other ones. Nothing's changed. I think let them do their job and do it right and bring it back. I don't see the urgency in 14 days.
Okay, so thank you for your comment, but however, I do then again bring to your attention that we need, if we bring it back on the 14th or another day, it needs unanimous consent to do all 3 readings in one sitting. So if we cannot get unanimous consent on the 14th, then I am leaning towards having a special meeting so that we can actually get a temporary massive bylaw approved and passed on the 14th.
I think, Your Worship, we don't know what the bylaw is going to look like. Until we see the bylaw, I mean, it may fly through if we're looking at the trigger factor that we're not going to have it made mandatory, but if when we get to that certain level, can we agree on that? I don't know, because we haven't been told what it is. I am in support of a mass bylaw. I just haven't seen the content of that bylaw yet.
Okay, so there's mention of the City of Spruce Grove bylaw, and that's been published on their website. So it does have trigger numbers, which is then tied to the provincial health watch. So as mentioned around this table, we're not the experts. We do not deem to, we should not pretend to be experts. I think if the provincial health says that we're on the watch list, then that should kick in.
And if you were to ask me, if that's what I'm being asked, would I support a bylaw very similar to what Spruce Grove has? My answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Did you have that down there? So, okay, so that, if you can double check and read that, Councilor Laurie, will I go to the next member of council I'd like to speak? Members of council? Councilor Bennett, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So with this bylaw, I can certainly understand what Councillor Laurie is talking about with, it doesn't have to be an emergency, but we have lacked the leadership that other municipalities have taken when it comes to passing some kind of bylaw. And your point, Mr. Mayor, of if we don't get unanimous consent, on the 14th, it leaves it to the next council meeting or to a special council meeting towards the end of September. With school opening, I would definitely see us doing it before rather than later. Now, when it comes to what Spruce Grove has done, in my opinion, that's a reaction. When we have a watch and it comes to that point where there is a watch, that's a reaction. I don't understand why we aren't being proactive. When we, you saw on the survey, Mr. Mayor, that there were several places where people said, yes, sometimes they wear a mask, they don't always. It's only when a mask mandate is in place that people realize that we're serious, and it is serious. You're correct, it is one of the tools, but it is a tool that has been recommended by our medical authorities, both in the province of Alberta, the country of Canada, and throughout. It is one of the tools that people need to be taking seriously. I met with a lady the other day, and she said, "Oh, are masks mandatory?" And I said, "No, not yet, but it is strongly recommended." And she said, "Oh, well, then I don't need to." It's that attitude, Mr. Mayor, that is causing people to come under the impression that masks are not as important and not part of that toolkit that need to be enforced. Enforced is the wrong word because I don't believe we'll ever get full compliance. In thinking about this whole situation, Mr. Mayor, I compare it to our traffic laws. If we had, and there have been, many debates about photo radar, it was explained in our council that photo radar is a tool that the RCMP uses to bring down the number of deaths when it comes to accidents. We have debated photo radar. If we ask our public, 50% people say, yes, they want photo radar, it's effective. Half of the people say, no, it's not. So our council makes these leadership decisions all the time. This is a matter of, honestly, being popular. Not causing 50% of our people to be upset with us. It is not a matter of giving in to what people perceive. It is a matter of being a leader, and when we have authorities such as our medical directors who are saying that it is part of the toolkit and should be taken seriously, then we as a council need to listen to that and lead the residents and perhaps increase their perception of the evidence that is shown that says that it is part of the whole toolkit that we need to be following.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. That's a very good comment there regarding what you're saying about taking summer initiatives. But you also mentioned that we have a chief medical officer that has said that masks work well, but it's not mandated. You're speaking towards mandating it in downtown Stony Plain. So yet you also said we need to trust them. So if we trust them, they're telling us it's not needed to be mandated. So I've listened to that, and so I'm trying to figure out. I thought you were going to angle to make a motion to change, to make an amendment to make this a full mandatory, not a temporary mandate. But then I heard you say, well, we should trust the experts, and the experts are not making it mandatory. So this is the debate that our residents have and every other person does, right? And you said we lost and we didn't show leadership. We showed leadership. We trusted the experts. We did not, as the 7 of us sit around the table and decide what was best for our community, because none of us has medical degrees. None of us have the data that the chief medical officer does. That's why we deferred to follow their instructions, their provincial health orders to how we operate in the town of Stony Plain. And if we really wanted to step this up a notch, we don't need a temporary mask bylaw. We don't need a mask bylaw at all. We just need to hire more police officers to enforce the 6 feet rule. That gets the message across. Because there is already a provincial health order that says you need to wear masks, and you should, if you cannot maintain 6 feet. And as mentioned earlier, that a lot of places, people are not wearing masks that are not social distancing. So from your comments, I'm not too sure if you want to make a motion to amend this to make it a full mandatory mask and not a temporary, or are we leaving this at temporary? Because you spoke both sides. I'm trying to figure it out here.
Ms. Mayor, I'm commenting and debating this motion. I was going to wait to see, I was going to actually make an amendment to this motion after this motion is thoroughly debated. But if that's what you would like, and if that's what will get this conversation going on mandatory face coverings, then I will make that amendment to this motion.
Yes, thank you, and I appreciate that, because then that allows us as a council to talk about one thing at a time. So if we're all going to make comments, there's going to be 20 different comments and suggestions that we can go. Right? The only way we can provide direction to our staff is to have a motion. So if you want to make an amendment, go ahead.
I move an amendment that this bylaw doesn't say that that we reach the threshold of watch. Just says a temporary mandatory face covering bylaw. So I would say, and it is a temporary one. So I don't know how to change it to say.
So I think what I heard you say is that we should show leadership and have it mandated, period. So I would, if that's what you're thinking and wanting to do, then you have to remove the word temporary.
To prepare a mandatory face covering bylaw.
That's good.
Your Worship, if I may, the term temporary in these bylaws refer to the fact that they are being put in place for COVID-19. They wouldn't survive past, so to speak, the pandemic itself. So, I mean, I don't know, just removing the word temporary is one way to go at it, Your Worship, I guess, but Your Worship, and if you can give me a little bit of latitude here, the motion in front of council now is simply to ask that a bylaw be brought back within 14 days. I mean, at that point in time, or on September 14th, or whatever council may decide, so to speak, as for timing, that bylaw would be presented And to be clear, there's really two ways to go at it. It's either right now, today, the bylaw's in effect, it's across the board for everybody all the time, or there's some kind of trigger. We spoke to the watch lists, council spoke to the, a number, a hard number of 10 or so. And although I can sense that council may wish to have the debate right here, right now, and certainly that's up to council if you wish to do that, when that bylaw comes back would also be an opportunity to debate, because you would have the information in front of you. We would have some background as to who does what exactly, whether, again, mandatory, which I believe there are 3 right now in the Edmonton Metro region. There may be others in Alberta, I think. Calgary may be one, I believe. I can't remember. We would have a little more information like that. You would have a bylaw that would come in fully written. We have it drafted, frankly, Your Worship, already. And you could house the debate of timing at that point, because if I can interpret and understand, I believe Deputy Mayor is speaking towards having something that kicks in upon approval of the bylaw and is mandatory across the board. And again, the other option is that it has a trigger point. I'll stop there, Your Worship. I'm not sure if that provides a bit of just advice as to process, but I'll stop there.
Okay, so that word temporary doesn't mean it's hit and miss. Like, we can have that not in the motion, and it still comes back to the same thing. The temporary is actually in the bylaw itself, not in the motion.
Yeah, I believe, Your Worship. I think we're on the same page. But the idea is just that the word temporary on these bylaws is speaking to the notion that, at some point this pandemic will be complete or what have you, and these bylaws would be, no longer in effect. That's where the word temporary is coming from, in my understanding, in the bylaws. It's, I believe what council is talking about, I believe what Deputy Mayor is bringing up is just the actual enactment of the bylaw itself. Does it kick in today and it goes all day, every site as the City of Edmonton's does? Or does it kick in at a certain point in time? I believe that's the point being raised.
Okay, so clarify with Deputy Mayor, so is the kick in as soon as we do the bylaw?
I am speaking in favor of the bylaw that Edmonton has, where we are being proactive, not waiting for a trigger or a watch, and we are providing our residents with the face coverings throughout all public spaces.
So we are providing face coverings?
No.
Okay, so that's, okay. Let me just go around the council. So are we okay?
So that's why, Mr. Mayor, when I was reading the motion, that's exactly what it should say.
Point of order, Your Worship.
Good. It's your motion.
As the town manager clearly pointed out, we are not debating the mask bylaw. We are to be debating whether we want administration to bring a bylaw forward for debate. So let's stop debating the semantics of what that bylaw might contain, and let's get back to the motion at hand.
Right. So I would like to ask members of council to provide some comments on that, because when that bylaw comes back, they have to have some kind of sense and feel what council wants. Because I don't want to have a bylaw coming back that is so far out of left field that none of council supports at all. Right? And that is why we're having the conversation. Councilor Mattis, you're up next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a number of comments to make with regards to whether to bring a mask bylaw. So first of all, I find it ironic. I'm the only one in the room today that has a mask on, yet I believe in the value of education. We right now have the numbers of people who are using masks either always or usually between 40 and 43, 44%. Gee, if we could bring that number to 55 or 60% voluntarily, that would be a huge success for this community through education. I truly believe that And I just heard this actually the other day. It was the Conservative government, speaking of the Liberal government, continually moving into people's lives. So the involvement of government in controlling what people do is getting greater and greater. And there has to be a point when we say to the people, you know, we need to ensure that you're accountable for your actions and the things that you do personally, but that it's your decision. And so I'm very, very concerned about adding another layer, something like this. Even though there's precedent of others, I think we show leadership too by having a great education program and really working with our businesses and our community members. I spoke with the Executive Vice President of Human Resources of a major heavy-duty equipment firm last week, and she opposes mandatory masks. She's also a resident of Stony Plain. And she basically said that in her organization, in order for them to survive as an organization, they needed to ensure that their employees, through education, complied with social distancing, keeping a clean environment, because as we've just talked about today, it's all of these things. So if we look at a mandatory situation with regards to masks, where's the mandatory requirement for washing hands? Where's the mandatory requirement for every business to have a station, a sanitary station? Where do we look at how do we ensure compliance? Because I'd be quite embarrassed to have a policy, or sorry, a bylaw that's asking the public to do something when we're not going to enforce it, because it can't be enforceable, you know, and then we're only getting part of the puzzle there. So I am going back to, first of all, we have a low incidence here. We have a fairly good number of people that are utilizing masks right now and following process. Gee, if we worked at an education program that was effective in our community, and maybe we were leaders in the region in that, then we would go a far distance. We cannot control what people do in their homes when they have family members from different regions coming to their home, when they have group parties at their home. We can't control what people do. And so yet we're trying to control it on one small element, which is not likely to be successful. So basically, I mean, we talked about three components to this: washing hands, remaining 2 meters apart, and wearing masks where it's appropriate. And so those are all three components that would be part of a bylaw if we're going to enforce people to do things, that we're going to eliminate this. So I'm against a bylaw because I've gone full circle. I've gone from somebody that really thought this was the right thing to do to, as I've investigated further, feeling that it's just not a responsible thing to set a bylaw that we just can't enforce in the first place. You know, I was just going to suggest too, with the bylaw, we require citizens to do something. So don't park on the sidewalk. If you park on somebody's sidewalk, then the enforcement's going to come and give you a ticket. Don't smoke 15 feet from the hospital. If you smoke, you're going to get a ticket. You know, so we need to ensure that what we do is good leadership for our community, and I think we've got to be very careful what we create as a bylaw.
Okay, thank you for comments. Comments from Council Plechko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I want to speak to the 14 days first. I think listening here, there is some heavy debate that's going to be had regarding a mandatory or a non-mandatory bylaw. By having that come back in 14 days, it does allow us a little bit more time to get the information that we're going to require from administration. It gives us a little bit more time to have the conversations with the community that we need to have. Speak to Councillor Bennett's comments about a mandatory bylaw. I think when you talk mandatory, for me, mandatory means you need to implement. And I think that is something that if we're going to put a mandatory bylaw on, there needs to be a process that's put in place that makes that mandatory. So not choose not to do it and get away with it. Mandatory means it needs to be implemented. And a non-mandatory face covering bylaw is very similar to what we have today. Is people go to local businesses, and when you walk to the door, I know today I carry a mask in my pocket because some places I travel require that to go in that business, you need a mask. If I choose, I want to go in that business, I put my mask on and I go inside. I come back out, you know, if somebody reaches out to shake my hand, I wash my hands, I carry that stuff within my truck. So I think that's quite important that we allow our businesses to today be able to make decisions based on what's best for their business. Now, if we're talking within our own community, our own public services, our town employees, that I think is a recommendation that administration should be looking to do so that they keep all of our employees safe. And so, you know, the whole process today is a tough process because we have 3 or 4 different aspects of what we're trying to accomplish with multiple decisions to be made. So I think what it's quite important is, you know, I do like what Spruce Grove has done and most other places where they have put something in that has a trigger point so that when we are having an increase in cases, it does allow us the ability to put something in force that's right away. The downside that I see to all of these is there's nothing that makes people do it. And I know from our own business in the city where it is mandatory, I watch people walk in on a daily basis that absolutely refuse to wear. And there we're leaving our businesses hanging because there is a bylaw that says they should be in place. So now you end up with a bit of a confrontation, which none of our employees take and will not do because we don't want them to do. So you're back to the same situation that we're in today where the province has really said, stay 6 feet apart. There is a mandatory bylaw that's out there. If you can't maintain that, then you should wear a mask. And, you know, I'll speak a little bit to, I made a comment a while ago about the Health Act about wearing different types of things. When they tell you how there's very specific ways of building masks, there's thread count that's involved in it. It's 2 parts to a mask that somebody's supposed to make when they make them. So all of that stuff is there for us. We just need to read it. And I think by the education process through our social media, we can help to increase people's awareness, which then also helps to increase the wear of the masks. You know, we speak about a mandatory mask bylaw and supporting one, and yet I look through the crowd and I don't see anybody wearing a mandatory mask when you believe that. So, you know, we choose what's convenient for us at certain times, and I think what we have to keep in mind is what's convenient for people is their choice as we go along, and we really need to worry about what our town is doing for our employees, firstly, and then what our town is doing for our businesses, and not to be the dictator of what our businesses need to do to let people within our town. Thank you.
Thanks for comments. Councillor Loy, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We had, just about basically 50-50 people wear masks, not to wear the mask. When I sit here in council, I'm seeing 50-50. I think we can debate this over and over and over. If I was a business owner and I didn't want to have my people wear masks, and I don't want, it doesn't bother me if my consumers come into my business, are we right to tell them that they have to do it? You talk about there, Councillor Palechko, that telling people what to do. I just say, let's get the bylaw brought to us. Let us look at the contents of the bylaw and we'll take it from there.
Okay. And we'll go over to Councillor Meyer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Lots of good comments, so I'll try and keep my, I will keep my comment fairly brief. I'd like to say that this is an important discussion for council to be having. It's on the lips of almost everyone I interact with on a daily basis, and the public should be aware that council is having them as well. I particularly liked how Councillor Maddie's worded her comments. I do think it is important we tread lightly, and so just to give administration an indication of, I'm not completely sold on a mask mandate myself, but if we are going to be looking at one in a few weeks, I would much rather be looking at a temporary one based on a trigger than say a straight up mandatory one. So with that, I'll finish. People are looking for clarity and guidance at this time, and I appreciate our admin putting together the report. I think council's collective position on this matter will help provide clarity to our residents and our businesses.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Okay, so there is a lot of conversation about what's out there, what the public perception is. I'll tell you what, I'll do a demonstration for you. That was about 20 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. I am in favor of wearing masks when appropriate and when necessary. Fully mandated, I am not, because we do have provincial health orders. If you look at the current status of the COVID in our municipality, there has been 9 total for the last 6 months of this pandemic, 3 active. That is, out of 18,000 residents, that is 0.0001% of the population, which makes me feel that our residents are getting it. They understand what they need to do. It is not just about masks. It is about the whole toolkit of using proper social distancing, washing hands, staying home if you're ill, go get checked if you're not feeling good. And you know, people can say, you know what, we don't check everybody, that's why there's only 3. So even if you multiply that by 10, let's say people are asymptomatic and people are staying home and they're ill, that's 30 residents that are sick. Out of 18,000, that is 0.001%. Not even 1% of residents have the coronavirus, which again shows that they are doing what they need to do. Do we need to tell them what to do, or do we just need to educate them? I believe in education. I also believe in masks. Okay? And I'll share 2 more stories because I will support this motion so that we can actually debate it. I visited 2 local stores last week. One is Spring Lake Naturals. Before I went in there, I masked up. Why? Because I know I cannot maintain 6 feet social distancing through most of my time there. I automatically masked up. The next store I went to was Rexall. I did not mask up because that is a fairly large facility. And besides myself and the three cashiers there and the 2 pharmacy, there was 1 more person there. Very, very easy for me to maintain 6 feet social distancing. So I did not mask up. But that doesn't mean I'm against masks or for. I believe masks do work, but it needs to be done in conjunction with everything else that we've said around the table. So I look forward to the conversation that's going to happen in hopefully 10 to 14 days, and then we can debate what the actual bylaw says. We've heard of things about should we add hand washing, hand sanitizing, and all this stuff. So that'd be going to be a very, very interesting conversation and debate around the table. So I will support the motion, and I ask the members of council to also support the motion so that we can deal with it. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Great comments, lots of great comments on both sides of the argument. And as has been said many times, I will reiterate, this is an issue where It's almost split completely down the middle. And for different reasons. Some people because they feel the pandemic is a complete farce. Some people because they feel that this is the worst thing that has happened in their lifetime, and to many it might be. But then you have very good arguments like some of the ones that you just made about the fact that we do have many tools in the toolkit already, that as long as we are continuing to use these tools in the toolkit, and as long as we are continuing to be active in the community in prevention, do we require it to be mandated? So, you know, there's some great information. A couple things I wanted to raise based on some points that were raised. Just because we don't necessarily see it in front of us does not mean it doesn't exist. And I say that when it comes to regulations around businesses. The Alberta government has put regulations on almost all types of business for how they are allowed to reopen in the COVID pandemic, and that is listed on the Alberta Biz Connect website. That does include that their location must provide for physical distancing. That does include they must look at things like providing sanitizer, et cetera, depending on what type of facility, all of those type of things. So many of those things that we're already talking about, should we include these in our, should they be included in ours? They do already exist, but it's industry specific. And that is why this is such a hard debate, because as Mayor Choi mentioned, it can differ from business to business. It certainly differs even more from industry to industry to industry. And I think what we're looking at is a more broad stroke public protection. And we have that, as was mentioned. We have bylaws for all kinds of things, from how clean your yard is to whether a smell can emanate, for whether your dog can bark, for whether you can speed, et cetera, et cetera. We do participate actively in the lives of our residents for both their enjoyment and their protection. And that is where I center this debate on. I believe, and I'd like confirmation from administration, I believe administration actually has a bylaw already drafted for us. Can I have that confirmation from administration?
Yeah, Your Worship, through to Council Laurie, that's correct. If you had the opportunity to check the Spruce Grove, the Leduc bylaw, even the City of Edmonton, they're rather straightforward. They're not, in significant detail. So we do have one prepared.
So, Your Worship, then I would actually propose, as I was looking at my motion, an amendment, or I will amend my motion, because it's mine, I don't have to propose it.
You don't have to amend it.
I am going to
just
say
change it.
within 7 days, because this does not put any tax on our administration. Our administration has the work done. As you mentioned, if we require multiple, or if we do not get unanimous consent on first reading, we will have to come back anyways, and whether that be September 14th or a date that gets proposed in the next meeting, that is what it is. The information's there. We've been having these conversations for weeks and months already. As was mentioned, we are much more followers right now than we are leaders, and I think it's time that we stand up and we say, okay, we are going to debate this for Stony Plain. We're going to talk about this for Stony Plain. We've already been beating around this bush for weeks. If administration's ready with a bylaw, what's our delay? Frankly, I'm almost disappointed that we didn't have a bylaw in front of us already. But again, I think we dragged our feet. We had plenty of opportunity for this, but we didn't take it. We're having the debate, we're having the discussion, but we're doing it in all of these tiny steps, when the reality is the end result is, do we or do we not put a bylaw in? So let's get what the bylaw would look like in front of us, and then let's start that debate, and let's get that decision made. So that's what I have for closing. Thank you.
Okay, so since just changed it, can we just, 7 days is hard to kind of figure a day that works for everybody. Can we just pick next Monday?
That is 7 days from today, but I could change that to say as soon as possible by administration. So if administration needs 8 or 9 days, maybe they need 8 or 9.
Well, to be fair with the members of council and stuff, we do have plans. So if to be fair to have a good, wholesome debate, we should make it set a date, and I think next Monday will give us ample time to then again to make arrangements so that we're here instead of like calling it tomorrow.
Mr. Mayor, are you asking that we have this debate a week from today?
Yes. Because that way then there's no ambiguity on 7 days, right? It could be, what if we decide to call it on a Saturday? Because that is within 7 days, or that Sunday. Thanks, Councilor.
If I may, Your Worship, I'm on holidays now, but I'm here. I should have left Saturday, but I couldn't. don't particularly want to have to come back on Sunday to be here on a Monday. I will. But is 1 day, 3 days going to make that much difference? That's all I'm saying.
Yes, and then Councilor Loyan, I understand you're on holidays, and if you feel strong enough, you can also still kind of chime in via virtually as well. We still have that option. Okay. Okay. Okay, so Councilor Laurie has actually amended his own motion to say 7 days, so I'm just make it Monday, and then just the date that we can talk about.
Your Worship, I'd accept a friendly amendment, but if there is any member of council who does not feel that Monday works for them and has an alternative proposal for a date, I'd be open to hearing that, as I do feel this is a discussion that requires all of council's presence. But I would agree with you, we do have alternative means other than being in chambers, so I would suggest if somebody is on vacation that they could call or virtual rather than cutting their vacation short.
Okay. Okay, so my friendly is then to be August 31st. And we'll let staff figure out the time best works. So, members of council, I've always made sure that I'm very, very clear to you guys that council is not our life. It's part of our lives that we do to support our communities. And if you feel strongly that you need to be here, there is a virtual option that you can do it. And if not, I'm pretty sure the last couple meetings that we've had and we've chatted about this, we get a sense, an idea of where each member stands. So members of council, so the motion is to have a temporary mandatory face coverings bylaw be presented to council at a special council meeting on August 30th. Any discussions and debate on the date? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call the question then. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that is carried. So there will be a special council meeting for August 31st. Administration, we did 9 o'clock this time. Is that still a fairly good time for our staff to get everything all ready?
Daytime council meetings are absolutely good for our staff, Your Worship.
Councilor Bennett. Deputy Mayor. Okay. Okay. Sure. How long is it? How long is your meeting? Okay. I will switch that. I will make my appointment till after that. So 1 o'clock? I think we all debate better after a full stomach. We're not as hangry. Okay, so 1 o'clock. Okay, members of council, that ends our agenda. Thank you very much for the conversation and providing your input and your comments and your thought processes, because that does make us make better decisions for our community. So look forward to chatting with you guys all again on August 31st so we can debate a temporary face covering that is being presented by administrative staff. Thank you.